Hi everyone, my name is Camille Messdaghi, and today we have a very, very special session for WoSEC San Francisco Bay Area's chapter. I am the head of the chapter, also president of WoSEC, and today I have a very special guest with me. Would you like to tell the world who
Yay!
you are?
I would. Hi, I'm Camille Eddy. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, but I also work as a product engineer right now for a startup in New York. I work remotely from my home office here in North Idaho. So really happy to be here with you, Chloe. Awesome.
Excellent. So today what we're going to talk about is your journey into STEM and then we're going to go from there and
Yeah.
where you are today.
Yep.
So if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to ask at any time. Just put it in the QA section of Zoom because that seems to be the easiest for everyone. So my first question for you is how did STEM even show up on your like option
Yeah.
when looking at different roles, jobs out there and career paths? What was it about STEM and what were some other careers that you were considering before you headed towards the STEM journey?
Yep. Okay, I love this question because it started for me when I was 12, and I had a whole list of things that I wanted to be. Like I had some notebook lists, and it had like 60 different things I wanted to be. It included firefighter, it included secretary. I ran the whole gambit. But I was also homeschooled at that age, and so one of the things that we were doing for like Black History Month, we were learning about Mae Jemison, who was the first Black female astronaut. And so I looked at her, I was like, ooh, I want to be an astronaut. And I told my mom, and she's like, great, well, you're gonna have to do research because, you're homeschooled, so you have to do your own research here. And so turned it into a research project, figured out that to become an astronaut, you have to be a scientist, a doctor, or an engineer. I had done little projects around the house, like make my own tool bag kit, like for hardware, but it was made out of like squares of cloth that I sewed together. I went outside. We lived in the high desert at that time. It was like Southern California, so high desert, Southern California. And I made an elaborate road system in our yard because it was all sand. And I took a hoe and I made a road system and mapped it out. So I was like, I think engineering would be a safe call. And so from there, just kind of stuck with that idea. I want to be an engineer, and ended up, going through high school and getting involved in some of the local universities' events for high school students who were interested in engineering. And so that really, step by step, like just lots of exposure to different ideas, different possibilities, and then I landed on mechanical engineering, and it was history from there.
I have to admit, I really like that you brought up your role model astronaut because
Yep.
there was a part of me that wanted to be an astronaut. I think that was one of the reasons that like drove me to science was like she was incredible. Like if you don't, you should everyone should learn about her story, but she's definitely a really good role model, positive role model for like every single girl out there to go into STEM. Um, so
Yep.
I have a question for you. Are you still considering wanting to be an astronaut?
Oh, yeah, I consider there a lot to be a lot of projects and problems that we need to solve on this planet first, but it's not out of the options. I always say, I keep myself in the running just by staying curious, and becoming a generalist. One of my mentors, when I still really was actively telling people, "Yep, I want to be an astronaut," he was like, "Well, then be a generalist." And I realized I have to have a first career before I can have an astronaut career. So here I am out here trying to be the best of what I'm doing right now. And then maybe in the future, sometime down the road, it will come along and I'll get to be an astronaut. We'll see.
Okay, so NASA, if you're hearing this, she's
Ah,
still down for joining your astronaut team, or SpaceX. If you're
yeah,
listening to this, I
right.
think that's that's pretty much NASA these days.
Yep, yep, yep.
Uh, okay, so what were so when you were going towards like, okay, I want to go more in the STEM field and whatnot, what were some of your favorite classes in high school? And did you
Um,
struggle with any of them?
Yeah, I did. So I'm glad you brought up the struggle because I really did struggle with math in the beginning. So I struggled with my fractions and my percents before I even got to algebra. And the thing about my mom had a philosophy of teaching, which was mastery first. So it didn't really matter. She didn't care what age we were, what grade we were supposed to be in, because we were homeschooled. As long as she reports to the state what we're doing, they're usually okay with it. And so, sure enough, struggled with fraction and percents, struggled with algebra, and I came to a full year with algebra, was struggling with it, and she said, "You're not going to go on to algebra 2 until you master algebra 1." Which was great for me because it taught me mastery of the things, right? And I kept struggling, but kept making my way through it, and I got to go to the Idaho version of Space Camp. So by that time, we moved to Idaho, and it's called Idaho Science and Aerospace Scholars. And what they do is they put you through a 16-week course, like a whole semester of space science course, where you have to learn all the math and all that stuff about orbits and apogees and perigees and all these kinds of really cool things about space science. And that's where I started understanding math a little bit better, and it motivated me to get my stuff done. I even got to go to NASA Ames Research Center in California, got to talk to astronauts, got to really, prototype the engineering role, as far as like, what does that mean? What does that mean to work with other people in STEM? How do my peers reflect on me, or how do I reflect on my peers? Things like that really put me outside of my own experiences. And then that same year, I was like, okay, I got it. I have to be ready for calculus when I go to college, and I'm not ready, right? I was just taking algebra 2. And so we got into the same school that administered the ISAS course. It was a distance learning academy. And I said, do you have any classes I can take? And they worked with me, and they enrolled me in 2 math classes back to back for algebra 2 and pre-calculus. And so once I hit that stride inside that space camp, I just kept going until I reached college. And so that was really helpful for me, and definitely a story of like, really bunkering down when it really came to it to get that math skills under my belt.
So Space Camp is the one that we should be thanking right now.
Yeah, yep. Space Camp and Mother, who was
And
like,
Mother. Yep. Yep. It's like, you're not going to do this, not until you do that.
Right,
Which is fabulous.
Yep.
Okay, so when it came to applying for schools, what were some of the setbacks that you had, and how did you overcome them?
Right. So one of the things about even traveling from state to state as a homeschool student is you have to learn the different laws of that state. And so when we got to Idaho, there really wasn't a ton of laws that we needed to abide by. They really just wanted you to be in school, and then that was it. So I lost some of the reporting structure I would have had in California, which meant when colleges, especially the more prestigious colleges, were looking at my academia, they were like, what's here? We don't understand this. So I had to get really good at advocating for myself and talking to people when my application kind of got stuck, as it inevitably would. They'd be like, well, you don't have an official transcript. And I had to explain to them myself. My mom didn't do this for me. In Idaho, I can give you my transcript as a student. And they're like, well, you have the laws here, so I guess we have to push it through. And they pushed it through. So what was really key was learning how to be an advocate for myself really early on, learning how to talk to the adults, that, was talking down to this 17, 18-year-old girl, like, I don't know, what do you want from me, And eventually, though, I chose on an in-state school, which was really great for me. I chose Boise State to start, and then I eventually transferred to University of Idaho. And what was really great is I had already built those relationships. That space camp I went to, all the other high school events that I went to was at that college, at that university. So I had a lot of foundation relationships. I still applied to other college universities to get that feel and to understand what it was like. But eventually just going to Boise State made sense for me.
Lovely. Okay, so tell us now, it's freshman year in college.
Yes.
How was your experience, the transition from like being homeschooled and whatnot, going to college suddenly, your first year and everything, and tell us about it.
Yeah, it was hard. It was rough. I'm not gonna lie. The adulting part was not so bad, right? Because college, especially when you're living on campus, it's pretty structured for you. You're really not gonna go hungry. They make sure that you don't go hungry, right? And you have a schedule, so as long as you can, get to, meetings on time, you're probably gonna be good. For me, it was learning about that transition from, homeschooling, and really personalized learning to public school, and very much not a focus on mastery. It's a focus on getting through the content and only have to take it once. The other thing that was a hindrance that I had to learn about really early was my capacity as a human being. As a homeschool student, I wasn't in a lot of clubs, wasn't in a lot of extracurriculars. So when I arrived on campus, I was like, all the clubs. I want all of them, And I like joined 12 different clubs, which was really bad freshman year, freshman semester. Didn't really get burnt out, but I definitely started seeing where my limits were, and I had never pushed myself that hard before. So I had to learn how to scale back. And it wasn't until my junior year that I really learned how to make a plan. Like what is your goal? Where are you going? And then is everything that you're doing getting you towards that goal? So that took a while for me to learn. I did come up with some really great opportunities, based on those relationships that I was talking about. I got to talk to an astronaut in space. I got to build and with a team of every student from every single college, we built a space symposium. So obviously still really into space, and got my first research position. It was because of Space Camp that I literally was hired before I even walked through the door my freshman year. I already had a research job lined up. So that was really crazy. But again, a lot going on. I think I had to retake one class. It was not calculus for some odd reason. It was I think it was my freshman physics class. I ended up having to retake that because of all the stuff I was doing and not necessarily having my focus. But I bounced back the next semester, brought it back up, and learned how to, I don't know, start my balance journey. It still took a while. It took junior year where I really got balanced and focused.
What were some of the lessons that you learned? Because it seems like
In
you're definitely learning how to balance things. And I feel like everyone is always finding that challenge some point in their life. What were some of the lessons that you've learned that you could share?
Sure. Number one is build a posse around you. So instead of focusing on like one mentor or one peer group at a time, it's definitely helpful to have multiple people around you that reflect different identities of yourself, right? So it was good for me since I'm kind of like an old soul and I can talk to adults. It's good for me to make friends with people who are older than me, make friends of the people who maybe faculty or advisors who were, definitely in their place in the university, but then also really important to befriend people who are like right behind me. So one of the things I did is I mentored high school students when I was in a freshman in college, and that was really helpful because it pushed me. They were looking up to me, and I was like, well, then I need to get my stuff together. I gotta stop. I gotta figure this out. And then the other one was, befriending people outside of my industry, right? So that space group that I was in that had a member from every single college on the campus, that was really good too, because then I learned about the ecosystem of the campus and how to operate within that and build alliances, more alliances. So having a posse, not one group, is really important. The other thing is to find a mentor in all of that that reflects your identities. So it doesn't matter if they reflect all of them, right? I'm a Black woman in Idaho, going to school. I didn't necessarily need to always have someone who matched that completely. But when I did find my first Black woman mentor, my whole trajectory took off. I started having that focus because she started telling me, like, this is how I approached it. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm running up against. And it started to make a little bit more sense. And then with my posse, I was able to take the best of everybody's advice and then apply that to my goals. So having more voices, not less, was actually helpful to me. And that's definitely something that I learned that helped me filter the future opportunities I got. It also helped me filter how to express or facilitate people understanding my past, being able to have that visibility by saying, look at my accomplishments in the past, and then let me go do more. That came really into play when I did my first internship, when I went on to go outside of the university. That's my last point will be, go outside the university, go outside your organization, because that's really helpful when you have to stand on your own and be like, yep, these pieces do go together, and this is how. Yep.
Yeah, definitely on that. I mean, like if when you're going to college, you're also wanting to think about what job you want when you get out of college, and like
Mhm.
internships are like the best way of doing that.
Yep.
Also mentorship, so you also know which could be a better direction for you, so you waste less of your time on trying out different things. Your mentor will be like, well, let me tell you a little bit more about this field.
Yep. Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's what your mentor did. It's like, no, we're
Absolutely.
gonna have a sit down conversation. You don't want to go
Literally.
proud. I've
It was
got this.
like drawing a map.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Tell us a few of the first internships that you had and how much that started paving your way to your career.
Yeah. So when I first started college, I didn't think I was internship material at all. I didn't think that the big companies that I was using all the time, like the Googles or the Facebooks, would ever be interested in me, especially since I was hardware. So I'm a mechanical engineering student, very hardware related, and I always heard like, yeah, we're not hardware, we're software. Come to find out, every company has hardware at some point, right? You have servers, you need hardware. But what really started me was getting situated in my field. So I had begun a little side business as a web designer. So I was paying my housing by building websites for people, and so that gave me some software know-how, or some software, awareness and familiarity. And then I left that to do my first research position, which was all mechanical engineering. It was about ceramics and building like antennas and stuff like that. And I was just a little person, in this manufacturing process, and just learning about like, ooh, shiny, like this is really cool, like, oh my goodness, processes. And that gave me the confidence to say, yeah, I'm a mechanical engineer, for sure. And kept tackling different projects. And what happened was I built a little bit of a portfolio within my first year. I had like 2 or 3 different projects that I could rattle off if someone asked me, like, what have you been doing this year? Which is really important. When someone says, what have you been doing this year, or what are your passions? Give them a real answer, because they can help you get to the next place, even if your passions or your ideas change over time, which they always do. And so I got a really big opportunity, like, just got some good exposure. And HP was local to me. They had a campus on Boise. And the hiring manager actually called the computer science department saying, do you know where this lady is? Camille, like, we would like to bring her in for an interview. And like the email chain was funny, if you ever saw it. Like, it was like, yeah, let me forward this over to the mechanical engineering department, and the mechanical engineering department forwarded it to me. So I went in, did an in-person interview with like 3 or 4 people in one day, which is a lot now that I think about it. And they gave me a verbal offer. And that interview was with the printer team at HP. And when my manager, this is a really good story about managers too being advocates for you, or your mentors being an advocate for you. My manager looked at my resume, and those few projects that I had on my resume, they pointed him towards emerging technology. Like, printers are cool, but we also have a robotics team. Would you like to go to the robotics team? So my manager gifted me to the other team, which is crazy. Like, I've never seen that before ever. Like, never. So I got to build a robotic hand with the robotics team, which was really cool. It was my project. I got to own it from beginning to end. It was a computer vision controlled robot. So that meant when I put my hand in front of the camera, the robot hand mimicked my hand. And that went really well. And it taught me a lot about design, which is really important, foundational to every mechanical engineer. But it also taught me about intersections of technology. So there I was sitting on top of my project, which had software and hardware in it. And remember, I talked about having a little bit of software know-how. So I owned that. Like, I worked with another intern. We worked together. It's like 3 months. We were in and out of that project. And I got to go on to my next project, which happened to be even more software dominated. It was machine learning and robotics. And then I went to my next internship at Google X, which was all about robotics again, more hardware. And that really taught me about, working again outside of community, outside of my school organization. I moved to California for that job, which was crazy. And those were all stepping stones to where I am now. So now I'm working as a product engineer. I delve into software all the time, but then also I still have my hardware first love, and I'm working remotely in Idaho. So all those things kind of stacked up to bring me here today.
So I know that you do quite a bit of talks, and you've also have various different discussions around when it comes to products that are built but not by diverse folks and what ends up happening.
Yep.
Do you mind sharing with some people a little bit about that talk that you tend to give?
Yeah. So the talk is titled Cultural Bias in AI, or Recognizing Cultural Bias in AI. And you can totally find it online if you'd like to, delve more into that. But basically, in that internship at HP with robotics, I started realizing that there were narratives going around on the internet at the workplace about, not having really robust tested systems that were failing on people of color, or for some other reason, for a reason that could not be changed by that person, right? I can't change the color of my skin, but I can't be detected by facial recognition algorithms, which is a problem. And so I just kept digging and digging in deeper. And I realized that there was this whole piece of the conversation that was being either avoided, just kind of thrown about, or forgotten, which was by women of color researchers that were talking about this problem, began in 2016, when barely anybody had heard the word, bias in AI, or, ethical AI, or fairness. And so I developed a talk that highlighted their work, but then also talked about my experiences and where it was going. And this was a time when nobody had any out-of-box solutions. They're like, well, you just got to do better, or, the algorithm isn't racist. It's just not our problem. And so I started explaining, the idea of and the concept of AI that can tell us why it made the decisions that it made. And so from there, I just started just giving that idea out there. And, I didn't have any out of the box solutions myself. I wasn't developing any software for it. But what I was doing was just piecing together the story from my real experience, my lived experience, and the lived experience of other Black women, and showing it to them and saying, you can get involved in this process. You can read more about this, and it is possible to make it better. And then, a few years later, IBM, Microsoft, Google, they all came out with out-of-the-box solutions to help people audit their data, audit their processes, audit their AI algorithms, and to learn how to document the stuff that they were doing to show its limits at the forefront versus as an afterthought. And so even today, I still go around, I help people understand how to use those toolkits. I do workshops on it. I've been able to talk to some of the IBM researchers. I traveled to Budapest and got to share the stage with an IBM researcher, and we kind of took turns. Like, I gave the overview and he gave the mathematical, the really high-tech concepts that were being used. And that was really cool to see that partnership kind of come, to a head. So that's really important too, just being able to speak up for an idea and then share what you got and then see where it goes from there.
And what has been like your main takeaway, or the top 3 takeaways from that particular talk that you were giving about cultural biases that exist in technology?
Sure. So I came up with an acronym. In the world of fairness in AI, there's an acronym called FAT, but I changed it to FRAT, and that's fairness. So fairness, responsibility, accountability, and transparency. So this is a formula that you can use for anything. You can even use this to counter bias in your organizations, right? So fairness is, do we know why it's making the decisions that it's making? And are we sure that the way we came about to these conclusions was fair? Did it use the right data? Was it using data that equally reflected, different identities, different skin tones, or whatever it might be that we're consulting as our way to produce this new technology or this new endeavor? Then there's responsibility. So after we decided that, hey, it is or is not fair, who's responsible for auditing the system, making sure people's human rights are being protected? Or the point person that says, yep, that's on me, that's my technology, that's my team, we're gonna go fix it. Accountability is, what's the deadline, or what's the actual ramifications? How are you going to promote equity here? How are you going to do restorative justice here for people who have been harmed by this? Having that plan in place is really important, because then it stops some of that knee-jerk reaction that we get it, no, we can't predict everything, but we could probably have a good idea of the depth of pain that we've caused, or even some of the things that we've uncovered, and what's the next step from there. Who's going to make sure that, February 2nd, you said that this algorithm would be finished and fixed, so it's done, and then transparency is the last one, and that is providing people levers to understand why the algorithms make the decisions that they make, and then also to be able to say, hey, I want to change it. So in the case of Facebook, for example, they're doing a better job at this too. Being able to say, why am I seeing this? Why am I seeing this ad? Or can I see more content that's in my geographic location? Can I see more content? This would be a great one, that's outside my worldview. Or, hey, I know that this content is inside of my worldview, and that's where I'm comfortable. Having those types of levers, even when you're in an organization, you're dealing with people, right? Giving people outs. One of the ways that I give people outs is I always say virtual is voluntary. I never crush people for not making it to my meetings on time, because virtual is voluntary to me. So having levers so that people can make decisions about the technology that they're interfacing with is really important. So those are I think those are 4 main points of what I learned from that.
So the other thing with the cultural biases that exist in technology and everything is also because it's still pretty much run by cis white males. And this is an ongoing issue. And that's why we also have issues when it comes to products not working for everyone. And why, still airbags are more dangerous for women than for men, and all these issues. What are some ways, and I know that it's something you're passionate about, what are some ways that anyone who is listening, that is in management, that is overseeing these developments and whatnot, what are some things that you wish they knew and that they can implement?
Right. So conversations, I think that, it might be a cliche now, but crucial conversations is something that you can always implement at any level, even if everything's for certain, like, oh, for certain, this does good for people. Oh, for certain, we're serving people. To just question that a couple of times is great. And then sometimes creating a safe learning space is also important, right? So there's a learning space, not just for, the cis white man who might not be aware of some of those blind spots, is trying to figure it out. But there's also learning space for, the person of color, the woman of color that's in your space, that is like, I saw this coming, but I didn't know how to talk about it. One of the things I had to learn was how to communicate these ideas in a way that brought comprehension to people's lives and their work lives and their careers. Like, oh, I understand how I can do it better. So that starts with conversations. The other one is that there are toolkits out there that you can play around with, and you don't necessarily need that embarrassment or that fatigue to, we hear about that diversity fatigue. That doesn't have to be a part of the plan. If you plan really well, you'll execute really well. So some of the things that I think comes about when we make mistakes or we see mistakes realized is the planning process. How can we make the planning process better so we can avoid those things? And I really would caution against the defeatist attitude when it comes to these things, even if you're not representing, a group of people who are marginalized that maybe you don't understand. There are ways to bring more people to the conversation. There are experts out there. There are speakers. There are consultants, and of every type, there are people of color that are awesome in those roles. And it comes down to really being serious about sourcing those people and getting them into your organization.
I love that. So now I have some questions for you because, I work in security and whatnot, and a lot of our members, they work in security. They're either in tech right now and thinking about going to security, or they're in security in some tech company. And so how has security played a role in your career and when you're developing items? Does security come to mind at first point, in the middle of the process, or towards the end?
Right. Okay, I'm going to answer honestly. I would say probably towards the middle, when we start realizing, oh, we want to deploy this, and then we're thinking about people's data. And I work sometimes with students too, so we get real cagey after a while, where we're like, have we thought about this yet? Like, we got this idea, and it's great that we bootstrapped it and, you know, put it together and failed fast and all that. But then when it comes to actually bringing people on board, which is usually the very next step we want to do, it's like, we got to think about who we're serving and if we're protecting them. And so usually there's a whole other team, you know, I'll be honest, that deals with security for me on my behalf, so I don't have to worry about it or mess it up. But that is really important, especially when dealing with people's information. The other thing that we talk about, not so security focused, but definitely bias focused, is making sure that we're using our work ethically, and that we understand that once we release the technology, it doesn't just stop. You know, people continue to use it, and they might use it for ways that we did not intend. And so understanding that and some of the ins and outs of that, or how it could be easily understood or misinterpreted, is also something that we kind of bring to the forefront. I use a curriculum or a guide called data sheets for data sets. And I use this even for technology that isn't a data set, because it's by Timnit Gebru, and she talks about, you know, questions that help people understand, if they were to pick my project up 2 years from now, this is how I designed it, this is what I designed it for, and these are the limits. These are some of the security issues. These are some of the things that you should be aware of and you should be careful of.
So when working with security folks at some point in the development process and whatnot, what have been kind of like your commonality situations, I guess, or whatnot on that front? What seems to happen? What's common occurrences when you're talking to
Oh,
security teams?
not necessarily understanding what they're saying. You know, like they're like, you gotta do this, you get login issue. Like, it's usually a jumble of words. But then when you find someone, especially someone who's really intent on educating you as well as like going forward, that's usually really helpful. So yeah, the commonality there is that there's definitely a lot of misconceptions that I even have about security, and it's really important to understand that. You know, things about like single logins, or even just understanding that, you know, you can't always design for what you expected to design for. Like, you know, that's a really risky behavior, a really risky move for someone to do. And understanding that, and then taking a step back and kind of going back to the drawing board and redesigning it based off of, I mean, I do that all the time as a mechanical engineer. I'll tell people, like, you know, the electrical engineer or the software engineer, like, that's not going to work. You're going to overheat my system. Like, go back, you know. So now it's kind of me taking the back seat and being like, okay, I got to go redesign it. All right, you know, yep.
Okay, so I definitely have heard this before, is when like security folks are trying to tell the engineering team, this is what you need to be doing. And engineering team's like, what are you saying to me? I am so confused. And like, it's really weird because you always find that as a problem, like a communication problem. Is like both sides don't know how to talk to each other. And then sometimes they have to bring someone who sits right between them to
Yes.
the moderator to be like, all right, this is what they're saying in
Yep.
your language. This is what they're saying in their language.
Yep.
Do we have a solution here? Like,
Yes.
and it's one of those reasons why there's more and more DevSecOps folks that are coming about, because they're like that middle ground. We're like, we're gonna try to work things out here and be that communicator in between.
Yep.
For those startups though, it's a struggle to have that in between person. What are some tips that you have for security folks when trying to talk to you about a product that needs some updates or whatnot?
I would say, I don't know. Yeah, I would say be in the process really early. Like, I took a color game test, and I don't know if you know, like, the color game test, but like, I rated really high on gold. I really love rules and definitions. I have no problem with rules and definitions. So being early in that planning process, not later, is wonderful. I mean, in the startup world, you're really right. It's hard to get all those people to be in our small, like, you know, we have like 3 people who are full time, and then everybody else is kind of scattered out. So it's hard to even think about like my past project that I just finished, right? Because I definitely wasn't considering security until later. And so it's like, yeah, it's actually really coming back to me right now. Even so, you know, being early in the process, having maybe I liked what you said, having more of those people who sit in the very middle. I mean, I did that for as a mechanical engineer. I sat in the middle of hardware and software and helped them talk to each other. So it's definitely something that's needed and intersectional. But having those plans, written language is great for me. I'm even better at written communication when we do it. Like that's the first thing I look at is a document, and then the second thing I do is I come and talk to you about it. That's really helpful for me because I am all about the rules and the guidelines and the procedures. I like systems that work together. When people throw a wrench into my plans, it's not so much like, I might be shocked, but problem solving is like what I do all the time. So, also the other thing is to be mindful of what time of day it is. So I like to get hit with hard problems early in the morning, not late at night. I don't know if that helps anybody, if anybody need to hear that, but hit me with the hard problems early in the morning.
It's interesting because like with security folks, one of the things is that ours is like all day, all hours, no matter what. It could be 2, 3 in the morning. Emails are being sent and like responding and everything. We don't sleep pretty much most of the time. We're like different, I guess, the different beast of them all. So to do better on those fronts, these are great suggestions because I think we want to hear how we can work better, and I think it also has to do with like break it down, um, be specific, but also know that you're not talking to another person in security. You're talking to someone who doesn't do security,
Yep.
and whatnot. Now, when you were in your classes themselves, did you ever have to take a course for your degree in security?
No, I actually did not. In mechanical engineering? Nope.
It's interesting because, like, it's one of those things that I think about. It's like, yeah, like,
Yeah.
no, I don't.
I don't even know that, like, of course I wasn't in the CS program, but that wasn't something that the CS students were talking to me about. They're talking to me about their Java classes and their structures and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been like one of those things that a lot of us talk about in the fields. Like, well, you have all these people from computer science, but they only maybe took like one security class the entire time, when security is so wrapped into it and whatnot. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some other experiences. So when you were doing your internships and whatnot, what were some of the issues that you saw as an employee that you wish that they were better at?
Yeah. So I always called, so I had 4 industry internships before I graduated. And so I started understanding what the all hands meant. And really meant was the indoctrination classes of understanding like why the company was the greatest and it was amazing. And so one of the things that I wish that I had seen a little bit more is for interns or for early career people in general, teaching them how to be, citizens of the earth versus, just, very solid and very committed and devoted to this one company. Because eventually I kind of fell out of that. I was like, I'm really not into the big companies anymore because I can't get around this whole like we are doing things that are so good for the world and it can possibly be anyone that does it better than us. And I was like, so becoming good citizens, I think, really does depend on being happy or appreciative for the small contributions that individuals make to their communities, like the communities that you're growing up in, the communities that you're living in, making sure that you're doing more than just doing your 2 hours a month for free volunteering work. Being actually participating and understanding the problems. I remember when I was at Google, I got a DM from somebody in Idaho, and they said, have you seen this story? And it was a story in Stanley, Idaho, that was they were seeing a huge decrease in their tourism because they're a mountain community. And what happened was sometime Google Maps had said that there is a blockage on their road and it was rerouting everybody around their town, and they depend on tourism. So I was like, well, I don't know what to do, but since I'm at Google, I G-chatted the maps team and was like, hey, do you know there's a problem here? And they got back to me, and then it was resolved, I think, like on its own, like a couple hours later. But for me, that was a really big like kind of moment for me where I realized that there's a lot that was going on even in my community in Idaho when I was sitting there in California, and that being a part of this company didn't necessarily mean that I was helping or advocating for them, I had to be actively doing that. And so that's something that I think is really important, is allowing more communities, even if they're smaller, even if they're not in Silicon Valley, to really represent the conversation. Another thing I talk about in my talk for bias is there's a lot of people in the world that's not on the internet, right? Obviously, you have all the other countries out there that don't necessarily have the connectivity that we do. So when they do start coming online in more numbers, they're going to see a world, an internet world that was not built for them, because we were designing for other people. And so I think that's really important too, to become good citizens of the earth, is just understanding how we can be designing better projects, being a little bit more mindful about security, but also being mindful about bias, being mindful about planning well, and serving as many people as possible versus okay, and let me take that back. Not necessarily as many people as possible, but serving people as well as we can. If you're in a small community, smaller solutions for smaller problems than the big Google, that's okay too. And how do you design really good projects that way too? Yeah.
Love it. So now my question for you is that uh, if you were to come back to Silicon Valley area, is there a particular company you would want to work at and why?
Um, so coming back to Silicon Valley is a moonshot for me, for sure. And that's because I like it so much out here, and I like working remotely. I really do. I was working remotely before the pandemic happened, so I team work remote. I would probably work for a startup. I would probably really plead with them to let me live outside of Silicon Valley too. But any startup that has a great project. So I've always told people, I've told recruiters this, I've told people who are interviewing me this, I really am not here for your company name. I'm here for the project. And if the project impresses me, or if you can't tell me the project, I might decline, because I'm here for the projects. So any project that combines my interest in, helping society be a better place, especially be a better place for Black women to be, here and represented truly and faithfully, that's interesting. Doing something with hardware, my first love, is really important, but also being able to sit at the intersection and help with communication, comprehension, and understanding across all those platforms. That's really my goal. So if you find a project like that, and think I'd be a great fit, let me know.
So what kind of projects are these?
Okay, so these could be robotics projects. These could be, I'm a product engineer right now for a learning management system, which is, crazy. It could be a space project, really anything. I really don't set a cap on that imagination. I have 3 rules to life. So the first one is say yes to everything new. The second one is don't do anything twice. And the third one is make your accomplishments visible. And so as long as it follows those 3 rules, I'm good. You really could hand me anything and I'd be like, okay, let's try it.
Excellent. So say for example, like they decide they're going to make another type of Harry Potter world, but they need some mechanics to help them on everything. Would you do that?
I mean, I've never read the Harry Potter books, but I'll do it. I'm very level, like you can tell, like I'm just very even. Like I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And then hopefully there would be some cool historical representation that's gonna happen. Like, I don't know. I don't want to say anything that will make the Harry Potter world mad, but if there's something really new happening on that scene, like they're using emerging technology, like using AI or using computer vision, definitely count me in.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think the Harry Potter world, we're kind of split right now because of what's been going on.
I know. I'm so sorry. Hey, there's some other great authors out there too. So,
Yeah. Speaking of other, authors out there, one of my questions for you is what are some of the books that really inspire you in your career and that you recommend for other people to read?
Oh man, I wish I had some of them sitting around. So one of the ones I read when I was having a really hard time with one of my managers, it was a woman manager and we could not get along and it was not going to work. And it didn't. But what I read to get me through that was the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And it was really helpful for me to learn how to, navigate around some of those issues with clarity, but then also, with honesty for myself and for the people that I was dealing with. So definitely, it's written for managers, but read it even if you're not at the manager level, because it will help you understand how to talk to managers, for sure. Let's see, another book that I really liked was Design Your Life by the guys at Stanford and D School. That was really cool because I really only remember one exercise in the book, but it was so important. And it was about surrounding yourself with good energy, and like the energy that's positive and gives you energy, and then the energy that is negative because you're doing something you really don't want to do, and how to like intersperse those. That really helped me develop a little bit more discipline, I would say, to get things done that needed to be get done. Because I definitely had, especially those years that I was working in Silicon Valley, that was a crazy year. I can't believe I did so much. Like now that I'm in Idaho and life's really slow, it takes 2 minutes to get anywhere in the city. You know, I'm always like amazed when I look back at my pictures, like, oh my God, I was at this event one night, and the next night I was, and I had to go from San Jose to San Francisco for both of those trips. So I'm like, wow. So that was really helpful, just to like understand how I could be in charge and in the driver's seat. Let me see, any other books that I really enjoyed. And then also just, I guess, awareness about where I was and my place in the world as a Black woman. So Isabel Wilkerson is a really great author. She wrote Caste, and then another book that I read right before that. And that was just about, it's about the Great Migration of Black people from the South to the North. And so just that actually surprisingly really helped me even in my Silicon Valley journey, because it really just taught me about, you know, where I came from, the stories of the people that got me to this point, and being grounded. So you can tell I'm a very mindful reader. I'm not a very engineering type reader. I could count my textbooks, but we won't do that. So
I like this. I like this list. Okay, so now for those that don't read books because they say they don't have time, but they do have time because they're Netflixing.
yeah.
What are some of the movies and documentaries that you recommend for people to watch that inspire you?
Oh my goodness. I wish I could have written a list. This would have been a great one to like come prepared for, because there are some great ones out there. Okay, so the first mindfulness one, I promise I'll get some more entertaining ones in a second. But the first mindfulness one I want to talk about is Brene Brown's documentary on Netflix. Really great. Talks about vulnerability, talks about just being able to show up for yourself and show up for other people in a really real way. Okay. For entertainment purposes, Star Trek. I've seen all the Star Treks. I could count them all for you. I could tell you about all the nuances of the different plot lines. I love it. So definitely thought that Gene Roddenberry was a genius when I was a kid. And now that I'm seeing some of his technology ideas kind of come into real life, I'm really happy about that. So definitely, I would start with Voyager if you're really into women captains. I could go on, but I'll go to the next topic here. Let's see, my favorite movie collection. Um, I really like Matrix as well, for obvious reasons, right? Technology, emerging technology specifically. And then that really helped me actually learn about the intersection of software and hardware, actually, because I was looking at it as a kid. I don't know, I was like 14 or 15, and just like watching them talk about hardware connecting to people, and then there was software involved. And I think that's probably one of the first times I was like, we could do both. Like we really could do both. Look at these people. So I think that kind of brought me into this world that I'm in right now, which is a mechanical engineer being a product engineer for a software company. But you know, that's kind of how that happened.
It happens these days, right? Definitely happens. Okay. So we're at the almost at the hour. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put in the queue, the Q&A that is section.
Yep.
But in the meantime, you know, COVID has been really hard. You work from home and whatnot. What are some tips that you have for those that are, you know, still trying to get used to working from home and also deal with this surreal time?
Yeah, I definitely suggest journaling. I have kind of like a fake journal because it's my work journal. But I put everything down in there, and it really helps me keep track of the days because they have a nice little date at the top right corner. And then also my to-do tasks. So one of the things that I started doing was I stopped apologizing for showing up late to Zoom meetings, which is really important. And when I did that, the other thing I did was I set myself short-term and long-term goals, which is really helpful because the short-term goals help me know that a day has passed by, but the long-term goals give me something to do the next day. And having a balance of that, learning different balances was really helpful. I started being a little bit more visual and aesthetically curious, right? Like, so I was like, oh, what if we start using, you know, washi stickers and washi tape and things like that, and making our work notebooks, you know, more like a bullet journal. I have like a whole board right here with colorful sticky notes. And then I put my desk towards the window. You can't see anything because it's not light right now, unfortunately. But I created this like mini office space. And before I didn't even have a room just to my space. It was the kitchen. The kitchen was, or the dining room kitchen area was my area. And that helped me too because I made it really pretty and light, and that helped me like want to come to this space to work. So setting long-term and short-term goals, writing stuff down and putting dates on them, and then also just trying to make my space as colorful as I could.
I like it. I'm a visual person, so I do the exact same thing. I journal, I make things all pretty colored and everything to like be on top of everything, but I write everything down.
Write
And
everything
I
down.
have been trying to do the whole thing where like I don't apologize when coming late to a Zoom meeting. I'm
Yeah,
like, thank you for your patience. And it's
yeah,
so weird because you're so used to apologizing. Like,
yes,
sorry, my meeting went like way over expected time, but now it's like, thank you for your patience. Let's
yep,
begin. It's
yep,
like, it's very different.
yep. You
Okay.
gotta do it till it's natural.
Yeah, I just keep doing it over and over. All right, so we got a question. How should cultural biases be addressed in AI?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So the way I would address culture bias is to come up with a plan, a framework. And this is so that you're not doing knee-jerk reactions, you're doing proactive measures, but then also you have an established plan, because when you're playing the point game, nobody's gonna like own up to that, right? So that's a really great way to like de-escalate some of the situations and diffuse it. The other way is to use toolkits or to use external ways to audit your data. That's like looking at the AI Fairness 360 tool from IBM and seeing if there's any particular leanings that your data has. So it will tell you, like, for example, if it's favoring your data in the census, right? That's one of the test cases. Like it has like the 1960 census, and it's like, look, there's probably some favorability on white men, and it's like, yeah, right. The other one is to audit your AI systems for human rights. So making sure that people aren't having their information or identity used in ways that they did not consent to. That's really important. So people could say, yep, I agree to have my information stored in this database. A good example of this is is your ID cards, our state ID cards or our driver's license. I think it's like 1 in 4 adult Americans are in databases across the nation that are made up of just your picture from your driver's license. And sometimes police, particularly law enforcement, will use your existence in the database as some type of guilt. Like if they're looking for you and they can find you, they'll be like, oh yeah, you're obviously guilty because you're in my system, without really thinking about what's happening or how they got there or why, right? And then it just turns out from there. So if you happen to be maybe someone who's a person of color or marginalized in some other way, being targeted in that way can be super harmful, because that can ruin your record even with one mistake. So being able to audit your system to make sure that the outcomes are what you expect, to understand why AI or the systems that you're using is making the decisions that it makes, is really important. And one of the things that we haven't done so well, because AI is new, it's fancy, it's awesome, it gives us information at the tip of our fingers and it's cool, but we haven't actually sometimes looked at the systems we want to use widely and test them before we put them in use, which is kind of crazy, especially when it comes to dealing with people's lives, like law enforcement does, or like the medical industry does. Like if we're going to use these systems, we really need to test them first. So having that robust plan, like I mentioned beforehand, so that way you have that point person, you have you have fairness, responsibility, accountability, and transparency. Not only will it make the world a better place and make you a better designer and a better program manager, it will help protect the people that you intend to serve and the people that you didn't intend to serve as well. That's just really important.
Love it. Okay. I know we're almost at time. So what is one thing that you wish that everyone would practice, or a takeaway on anything that you feel like humans need to know about? What is one thing you wish that every human knew about?
I wish every human knew that math literacy is really important to scaling the ranks of society. People say all kinds of things, but really it's math literacy. And that's like just something that's been on my mind recently. If we, even as a nation or as a people, as the population of the world, understood math, we would probably have a better conversations. Just in general, we'd be able to work on problems together and solve them together versus the people who went to the university and took calculus. The other thing is, from my homeschool background, which is tied to this, is anybody can learn it. That's really important, and you can take that to anything that you think is elite, right? Anybody can learn these ideas, whether it's math or whether it's engineering, whether it's security, and you can learn them outside the formal classroom. So if we could get rid of that sense that you have to go to certain places to get this knowledge, and make that knowledge accessible to everybody, I think we'll live in a world a little bit more like Star Trek, possibly, where we're just all working on the same problem and we get through it together. So that's my goal for the world, is that we start solving more problems together.
Okay, you guys, we have to solve problems together because we gotta go and live in the Star Trek world. It's very important.
That's what I want. That's what I want.
Yeah, that's the future. I'll take that over COVID-19 2020 year.
Yeah, move it.
Seriously. Anyway, well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for being our guest. And if you guys, I'll have all the information if you want to follow her, get to know her, whatnot. Her information will be at the bottom of the video. And yeah, thank you all. Stay safe. This is the last session of the year. We'll be back in February for another session. We're taking January off for WoSEC. So yeah, I wish you guys happy holidays, happy new year. Let's all hope and cross our fingers that we don't have another year like 2020. We have a year that is just a fantastic way of starting a brand new turn, and hopefully in a safe and very happy world.
Yep. Happy holidays, everybody. Happy holidays, Chloe.
Happy holidays. It was great seeing you.
Great seeing you too.
All right.